Hi everyone, I'm Vladyslav Novikov, and joining me again is Andriy Dobriansky, Director of Communication at the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Andriy, hello.
Hi, thank you for having me on again.
So the account just humiliated Trump. His attempt to kick Lisa Cook off the Fed was blocked. So does this mean there is still hope for democracy?
Hmm. There are many cases being worked through, both through the federal system as well as the state level system, where Trump is trying to manipulate judges favorable to him, and also pushing the boundaries of what has been accepted precedents here in the United States. As far as what you mentioned, the Federal Reserve, President Trump has an unnatural want to have total control of the government. He's very much of a power vertical personality. We see that in the way that he demands people thank him and refer to him. Even during the height of the pandemic, he was upset that governors wouldn't thank him and would simply receive the help from the federal government. Much in the same way we're seeing that now with countries having to bestow gifts upon him whenever they show up. And here we have a totally separated central bank in the United States, the Federal Reserve. It's not supposed to be working in concert with any elected officials. It's supposed to make a decision on the rate of lending in this country, as well as stabilizing the value of the dollar. All for the benefit, mostly for Americans, but also taking a look at the international world, because the dollar is of course the currency that most trade is done with across the world. So here we have Donald Trump, not just in his first term, but now again in the second term, demanding that the independent central bank, the Federal Reserve, do whatever he wants. And since the beginning of his term, he's been trying to fire both the head of the Federal Reserve, making up a story that they have been wasting taxpayer money on remodeling their headquarters, not understanding, of course, that they do not need federal money. They have their own source of income. And then secondly, he started going after a Federal Reserve commissioner for having an improper loan document. It's come out just in the last 48 hours that not just the court case that you mentioned, which prevented the firing, but also that the loan documents are perfectly in order. This was simply a rumor started by one of his henchmen, one of Trump's people who he installed as the head of all housing loans in the United States. There's no reason for this person to have any access to this person's personal finance records, but apparently he was able to concoct this story. And what's even worse is that the crime that she is alleged to have done, many members of Trump's administration, now it comes out, have that same kind of falsification on their documents. So it's just a snowballing of different scandals around President Trump. And in this instance, we will see what happens with the Federal Reserve to the end of the year. Of course, we are all awaiting a vote on the lowering of the rate here in the United States as well. So.
Okay. The judges made their decision just hours before a K-Fed meeting on
Yeah.
September 16, 17, I mean, these days, where interest rates are on the agenda.
Yes.
Everyone's expecting a cut, right?
Yes. Hmm. Yes. The cut rate has been expected from early in the spring. President Trump wants it done immediately. That's not how the central bank works. It works very slowly. This happens during crises, like when after the pandemic, it did not change rates very quickly, but it takes time. It allows the market to crash sometimes. It does things slowly so that businesses understand that the central rate will not change within a day or a week. So in this case, they have been signaling that they will be cutting the rate. It will not be a big drop. It's supposed to be around 0.25%. And if they do more than that, I'm sure the market will be very happy and lots of trades. But at this point, it's very much expected to be a 0.25% rate cut for not because President Trump asked for it, but because of President Trump's tariffs. We have inflation now turning around and coming back up. We also have job shortages here in the United States. The job market is cooling off, so it's not a shortage yet. But in terms of different markets, other than the healthcare fields, all other job markets are very slow right now. So they want to incentivize businesses to have more jobs.
So, how is this seen in America? If rates are lowered, is that taken as a positive signal? I mean, for ordinary Americans.
Well, the reason for lowering rates For the president, it changes all the time. At the beginning of his term, he said, "Well, we need to lower rates to increase the economy," and then he took over and he said, "Well, I fixed the economy, and now it's fantastic, and now we need to lower rates because it's holding me back. I could even have a bigger economy if they lowered rates." In actuality, it's very similar to what he did during his first administration with tax cuts, and again this time with tax cuts. He inherited a fairly healthy economy. The United States had the best rebound from COVID than any other Western economy, and he simply wants to put fresh gasoline on a roaring fire, and not understanding that that's just for today, and he's not thinking about next month or next year or how the economy will react. So very similarly, the central bank is not interested in cutting rates at the beginning of the administration when they knew where the economy was, because they did not want to pour fire. Then all of a sudden inflation would skyrocket. Right now, they're interested in cutting rates because they see jobs slowing down. So they want to give businesses the opportunity to borrow funds from banks at a lower rate that would incentivize them to open new offices, hire new workers, etc. They also are very worried about inflation, and this is one of the reasons that you want to have a higher rate to begin with, because now you can play with it. As we know, during the financial crisis of 2008 and the after effect, many central banks around the world instituted a policy of qualitative easing, which means banks could basically borrow with no interest, no on their loans. So they could borrow from the central reserve of countries with very little to pay back. That was great for business to begin with, to start up the economy, but it gave very little room for the central banks then to adjust things. So now that we've slowly built our central rate up, now the Federal Reserve can operate on a quarter rate or a half rate change from time to time to balance the economy.
Mhm. Okay, so I have one more interesting topic. Trump is starting his visit to the UK
Yes.
with Ukraine among the top issues.
Mhm.
But what else should we expect from this trip?
We should expect a present. President Trump is very happy with presents given to him by kings, by prime ministers, by countries. Perhaps somebody wants to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize from England. Who knows? But you did correctly state that Ukraine will be a topic of discussion. I've been stating this on Ukrainian television for a while, waiting for this, because we know both Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the King Charles are both supporters of Ukraine, supporters of increasing aid, humanitarian and otherwise. We just had Prince Harry in Ukraine. But this is now being, even though I've been talking about it in Ukrainian television, it's now been picked up on American television, and they understand that that's going to be one of the big topics of discussion for the president. What we should expect is kind of unexpectedly for President Trump, we know his schedule for 3 days. His team doesn't put out a schedule 3 days out. Now they always make the press wait every day to find out what his schedule is going to be. So we know that he's already agreed to have a joint press conference with Keir Starmer. That'll be an opportunity to hear a lot. We'll probably hear from the British press side something about the shared antagonism between conservatives and liberals, because we just had that giant rally in England, Unite the Right, that people like Elon Musk supported and other supporters of President Trump. So there might be some of that. And of course, the assassination in the United States, that might be brought up. But I think most importantly for those who support Ukraine is going to hopefully hear some kind of positive steps forward. I don't think we're going to have an announcement about any aid or some project for Ukraine at this event, but this is a good stepping stone to do to have King Charles flatter President Trump, to have them give them President Trump some awards, and then he'll go into the UN General Assembly next week. Very happy with his world visit, very happy, and hear from more leaders. He will once again see the president of Finland, the president of the prime minister of Italy, all of his friends, and he will meet with Zelensky as well. And it's at that point that I think we'll hear something. Much like we had President Trump go to Canada for the G7 meeting, then he went to the NATO summit, and after that is when he announced the new plan to sell weapons to Ukraine with European money. So hopefully, the UK visit, followed by the UN General Assembly, will start turning the wheels in President Trump's head. What can we do to help Ukraine? And on the flip side, we also have the attempt by Republicans and Democrats in Congress to put the sanctions bill up for a vote this week. Actually, we might not have a vote this week, but by Friday, we will have language that is for the proposed continuing resolution. So our fiscal year in the United States ends at the end of September. So every September, October of every year, there's a debate about what kind of budget to spend for the rest of the year. And we can't get to an agreement because the Republicans and Democrats argue all the time. And so they've decided to push it until November and then have another debate in November. But to get from end of September to November, they have to pass a continuing resolution, which basically states we're not going to do a shutdown. We are going to continue spending what we did last month on a 1 month level. What Senator Graham and Blumenthal, which our viewers might know, have been proposing the sanctions bill. They are proposing as an incentive, because that bill is so popular in the Senate and Congress, as an incentive for members of Congress who may not want to sign the continuing resolution because they might want to have a debate or a shutdown. Let's add the sanctions to the continuing resolution. And therefore, for this small little bill that's only funding the government between September and November, we might be able to put in sanctions that will last the entire time for years against Russia. We'll find out on Friday. That's when we are supposed to see the first version of the written text of the continuing resolution. And of course, they need to vote on this resolution before September 30th.
Okay, the next fact surprised me, and I think maybe they surprised and you too. So, according to new data from the UK Home Office, application for citizenship from Americans are up 50%. The highest level since record began. Why do you think that is? Are people fleeing Trump?
We are, at the end of this year, for the first time since World War II, going to be a net exporting nation. That means the United States will export more people than take in. And why this has never happened in a very long time is because usually we accept a lot more immigration, we accept a lot more tourism. Tourism is absolutely down across the United States, especially from neighboring countries like Mexico and Canada that had the most people come for vacations or come to visit family. Las Vegas is in a crisis right now because that's an economy altogether built around having tourists come in, and they are simply not coming in. So tourism is down is one thing. The second thing is we're deporting. We're expected to deport at least 1 million people by the end of this year, and that all together puts an environment that people want to expand their horizons. Understand also that we live in an age that people can work remotely, and that has vastly changed where people need to live, and not just around the world, but even within the United States. You do not need to live in Washington, D.C. or New York or Los Angeles, any of the big cities, to do a major job. You could work remotely from anywhere in America. Now people have realized, because the workday is no longer a 9 to 5 workday in the United States, it's very much tied in with global time schedules around the world, that people can actually still work in the United States while working remotely from other countries.
By the way, there are mass protests in the UK. What do you think about this?
Well, the last big protest that happened in the UK was the Unite the Right rally. It was very much tied in on American news with the response to the killing of Irina Zarutskaya in Charlotte, North Carolina. In the same way that the people who tried to use that killing for their political benefit and say, why aren't you paying attention to this? You don't hate, you hate Ukrainian women, or you hate, and you only care about other people, not these people. In the same way, the social media response to the Unite the Right rally was claiming that there were 1 million people. Some people said 3 million people gathered in England, when the official police statistics, and this was in the middle of London, where they have the Royal Parade. They have all the police know exactly how many people are standing there. So official statistics are somewhere at the most 150,000 people. And now, again, that's only in London. It's not throughout the entire country. It doesn't represent really what's happening throughout all of England. England is coming to a place where more and more political differences are becoming intolerable at the local level, where people can't work with opposite parties, and that's a problem. But it's kind of like when I watched the attempted coup in Turkey a few years ago, and all I saw were pictures of the Istanbul airport, and I said, well, there's a large country outside of that. What's happening there? Where's the coup across the country? And similarly, we had 100,000 plus people in the middle of London rallying to say that they were being oppressed because nobody considers their feelings in writing legislation. When in point of fact, there's a lot of problems with England's economy going forward, and what they will be looking forward to in the meeting with President Trump is trying to figure out about increasing trade with the United States. This is at the longer President Trump turns away countries. He has insulted Canada numerous times. I'm sure you're familiar the way he calls Canada a nasty country. Doesn't like them. They should be a 51st state. Well, this week we're anticipating a decision by Canada whether to buy F-35s. They could cancel the order to buy American jet fighters and turn to the Swedish Gripen, just like Ukraine wants to order. So the longer President Trump keeps insulting countries, the more he's going to have to turn to countries like England. I always say Ukraine. Ukraine is the best partner you can have. Anytime President Trump calls President Zelensky, I will fly to Istanbul. Sure. Anytime you want, it's going to be 190 days this week since President Zelensky agreed to the ceasefire back in March. Ukraine has been an incredible partner. And so it's going to be countries like the United Kingdom and Ukraine and other ones that, even though we've been insulted, we're ready to be the best partner for the United States for the future, no matter what President Trump is saying. And there are going to be less and less of those countries. He insulted Canada. That's going to have an effect. He insulted the Prime Minister of India, and we saw him travel to China. The more countries he insults, the worse it's going to be for President Trump. And so, in that respect, it might be good for Ukraine as being one of the few countries that wants to work with the United States.
Mhm. And back to Ukraine, Marco Rubio said Trump may meet Zelensky in the New York next week. Is that realistic?
Yes, 100%. Yes, I can almost guarantee 100% that that's going to happen. Even if it's for a short meeting in a side room at the United Nations, but they will absolutely be at different panels together at the United Nations as well. There's many things being commemorated this year for the beginning of the 80th General Assembly. President Trump, of course, will be speaking on a different day than President Zelensky, but they will both be at the UN for different events. So I anticipate them to interact both at the United Nations and hopefully have a meeting outside, but we'll see.
Okay. So, Andriy, I don't know. So, what's really going on with all this protests? Because Trump is pressuring the EU, but all his deadlines for Putin have failed. What's the next checkpoint? None of Trump's big promises have happened.
Yes, President Trump has failed. I've mentioned that too on my when I speak on Republican channels here. I was really telling them that he had a great opportunity this entire first 6 months. He had a great opportunity to be a strong, forceful leader, get Putin to the table. Ukraine was ready to do any kind of deal, and not just. I'm not talking about that the President Zelensky was going to sign any peace negotiation, but Ukraine demonstrated that they were ready for the ceasefire when Russia was not. Ukraine was ready that they were ready to meet whenever President Trump asked for. Ukraine demonstrated they were ready to work together, not just on the minerals deal, but also a deal on drone technology, etc. It's clear that President Trump had an opportunity. And he has failed because he does not understand how to deal with an authoritarian. He clearly likes to have conversations with Kim Jong-un, with Xi Jinping, with President Putin. But in terms of working out a solution or pressuring them, he has no idea how to do that. We already see that China has manipulated him into lowering sanctions on chips they need for AI. They have reversed tariffs on different things that were started at the beginning of the administration. China clearly has, as President Trump has, they have the cards, and they have pushed President Trump to backing off numerous times. In a much similar way, we had this situation not just with Ukraine and the fact that attacks on Ukraine have only increased. I've underscored whenever I talk to Republicans in the United States that this is not, President Trump likes to say that this is Biden's war, not his war. And I say that, yes, that was Biden's war. But the war in 2025 is not the war we had in 2024 or before. We did not have this
Yeah.
level of drones, not this level of glide bombs, not this level of aerial assaults. And the top level, it's not just what happened in Ukraine last week, but the top 10 times Ukraine was attacked with aerial assaults all happened this summer, June, July, and August. And so, therefore, this is Trump's war. This kind of war is Trump's war. And he has to figure out a solution. And he has not. And so I feel that we're going to see, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, a way for the sanctions to be developed in the Congress. Now that's now back from their vacation. They had a month-long vacation. We'll see that something being worked out in the Senate and the House of Representatives to put sanctions in legislation coming up. And also, future legislation should have more military aid for Ukraine. But Ukraine needs to continue doing its two-prong approach. Yes, continue working with the United States because they have weapons now, but they need to be working towards EU integration ASAP and to get more weapons from the European Union. It needs to be both things at the same time. Europe is its own group and the United States is its own.
Mhm. I like it how you call it. It's Trump war now, and it's exactly in target. So it can be, is Trump deliberately running out the clock when it comes to Russia's war against Ukraine?
He is clearly unable to pull the trigger on making decisions. It's always in a couple of weeks. It's always 50 days. It's
Yeah.
always something, and then he issues not an ultimatum to Russia for attacking Poland. He issues an ultimatum to NATO, and of course, it's really Fico and Orban that he needs to talk to if he's upset about buying oil. That's just the fact, and we know that Elon Musk supports both of those people. We know that the same people that elected President Trump here are those who support the statements of Orban. The entire conservative political action committee had a convention in Hungary just this year. So we know that President Trump, if President Trump is upset that European countries are buying oil from Russia, he needs to call Orban and Fico, and they will have to listen to him. But it's not as if the rest of Europe has that means of changing their minds. The rest of Europe has already changed their mind in terms of where they're buying oil. Are they still buying LNG from Russia from different sources? Sure. Are there people who are buying processed crude from India that India bought from Russia? Sure. But in the end, at the very least, President Trump can talk to Orban and Fico immediately and have them stop if he's so upset about it. But what needs to happen is some kind of response, and that's why I am explaining to American government leaders that this is Russia's modus operandi. This is their MO. They will come to a negotiating table, and right before they sit down with you, they will do something ridiculous. They will raise the stake. They will invade Poland's airspace. They will block the radar on Ursula von der Leyen's plane. They will go beyond where they were. And then they come to the table and say, okay, you know what? We will stop doing what we just started doing, but not deal with Ukraine or not deal with Georgia or Transnistria or all of that. And I explained to Americans, this is what happened before the Olympics when Russia had the Olympics in Sochi. The war was happening, of course, in Georgia. There was no response enough to cancel the Olympics. But what did they do? They passed a law in Moscow to ban LGBT events. And before they were able to have the Olympics, the international community said, you need to remove the law. Okay, and Russia immediately removed the law, and that was it. So again, right before they escalated, and then nobody was talking about Georgia. Nobody was talking about my friends. And as the Ukrainian government recognized the Circassian genocide that happened 150 years ago when that was happening, that was Czerwone Pole around Sochi. That's where the Circassians were murdered by Russia. None of those things were mentioned. None of those things were, or the interventions in Ukraine, etc. So Russia has this. When I see what happened in Poland, yes, Russia is testing the West, but
Absolutely.
At the same time, they're also preparing to be in a negotiation and say, you know what, we won't do any more drones in Poland and Romania. Now everybody's happy.
Yeah, right. Interesting fact. Now in the news in Ukraine, they are saying that the war may be coming to an end. What's your take about that?
When Americans ask me when the war is ending, I say, well, Mr. Budanov said that we will have a ceasefire this year, and Mr. Zaluzhny said that the war will go on until 2034. So I say sometime in between, maybe we figure it out.
Maybe, maybe.
I think that having some kind of ceasefire would be welcome for Ukrainian people. I believe that we need to think about our children. We need to think about the civilian areas. I think that almost immediately, as any kind of ceasefire happens, we need to have as many European countries come in and others of the Western coalition come in and help Ukraine rebuild. And Ukraine will absolutely help the rest of the world in terms of the kind of technology they need to protect themselves going forward. So it's a two-way street, but I would love to see by the end of this year some kind of ceasefire so that we don't have as many people dying. We know from 2015, we know from Konotop, we know from so many historical events that this will never end until there is no more country to the north of Ukraine. Until that country is broken up and demilitarized, and there is no, as I said this at the United Nations when I introduced Gandalf from Azov. I said, to our country to the north, the soon-to-be former country of Russia, and that is my true belief, because in the international community, we can only have peace making nations going forward, and Russia has no interest in creating peace, in lowering the temperature. Their interdictions into elections around the world, their assassinations around the world, and of course invading their neighbors does not help the world. So we know as Ukrainians that the only peace for us will happen when there is no more country that is Russia. I'm not saying we eliminate the country, but that country needs to be broken up amongst Karelia, amongst all the peoples, the Chechen peoples. They need to stand up for themselves, and there needs to be no more military power there, because that is one of the major sources of conflict around the world. And I think one of the ways that more and more people understand that in the West is the fact that just this past week, you saw many United States senators say it is time to recognize that Russia is a state sponsor of terror. We've been saying that for many years. I've been saying that on my appearances on American television, and only the fact that we have Americans realizing that it's on the same level of Iran. It's on the same level of what was Syria. It's the same level of North Korea. And frankly, all these countries are working together. It is North Korea working with Russia, working with China, working with Iran. We need to recognize that country for what it is and put it on the list so that we know that we want all those countries to end up being free people one day. But we cannot do that if we don't recognize that Russia is one big part of that big evil, and that they're all working together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Andrei, thank you for the interview. It was nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. I can't wait till next time.
Yeah.